The silver lighter felt warm in Leo's hand, a smooth and solid piece of history, even though the air in the little cellar room was cool and damp. It was a Wednesday, March 12th, at precisely 7:14 in the evening. The only light came from that single, steady flame. It didn't just show him Anya's face across the small wooden table, it showed him the look in her eyes. She wasn't just listening. She was drinking in the words he was reading, like someone who'd been lost in a desert. That look, that hunger, made his own stomach do a slow, nervous turn. He was reading from a small stack of papers, the words typed on thin, almost transparent paper that crinkled with every careful turn. The pamphlet was called Whispered Truths, and it talked about things like open elections and free press, ideas that were ancient history, banned for over 40 years since the unified society took over. His voice was a low, soft murmur, barely louder than the constant, droning hum of the big street-level ventilation grate above them. That sound was their cover, their constant white noise. It meant the world outside was going about its business, unaware of the two of them tucked away beneath the city's feet. Their meeting place was a forgotten storage cellar under an old bakery on 17th Corridor. It smelled of yeast, old bricks, and a hint of wet clay. The room was small, maybe 10 feet by 10, with shelves holding nothing but dust and empty glass jars. Their one table had a wobbly leg that they'd propped up with a folded piece of cardboard. This was their 7th Wednesday in a row. For Leo, it had started as a curiosity, a dangerous little thrill. He'd found the pamphlet tucked inside a machinery manual at the factory where he worked as a parts inspector. He'd shown it to Anya, the quiet woman from the textile floor, because she had clever eyes and never seemed afraid. Now, it was a ritual. His secret hour of feeling like a real person, not just a worker with an identification number. He finished a paragraph about artistic freedom and risked a glance at her. Anya's fingers, usually still and precise, were moving. They were tracing a symbol drawn in the margin of the pamphlet, an old, looping glyph that stood for create. She wasn't just tracing it. Her fingertips pressed into the wood of the table, as if she was trying to carve the shape there by sheer will. Her knuckles were white. That's when Leo saw the hairline fracture in their safe little world. This wasn't just theory for her. This wasn't a history lesson. She wanted to make it real. The thought was like a splash of cold water on the back of his neck. He closed the pamphlet gently. "It's getting late," he whispered, his throat suddenly dry. The wobbly table shook as he moved. Anya finally looked up from the symbol, her eyes finding his in the flickering light. "It's only words on paper, Leo," she said, but her voice had a strange, tight energy to it. "In here, it's just words." That's when the first change happened. The steady, droning hum from the ventilation grate above didn't just continue. It was joined by another sound, a higher-pitched mechanical whine. Then came the smell. It was sharp, chemical, and utterly out of place. It was the distinct, lemon and bleach scent of state-issue sanitizer. A cleaning squad. They never worked this late on a Wednesday. The smell grew stronger, pouring down through the metal slats of the grate, cutting through the smell of old bread and dust. Leo's body reacted before his mind could. His breath hitched. His hand, still holding the warm lighter, snapped it shut with a quiet but decisive asterisk click star. The room plunged into a thick, velvety darkness so complete he could see spots in front of his eyes. In the black silence, he could hear Anya's soft, controlled inhale. He could hear the faint scuff of her shoe on the gritty floor. He counted his own heartbeats, pounding in his ears like a drum. For a full minute, they didn't move, didn't speak. The sanitizer smell was everywhere now, a clean, threatening fog. Then, slowly, the high whine faded. The droning hum returned to its normal level. The immediate threat, it seemed, had passed overhead. Leo fumbled for the lighter, his fingers clumsy. He sparked it again. The sudden flame made them both blink. Anya's face was pale, but her jaw was set. Without a word, they began their well-practiced routine. Leo rolled the fragile pamphlets into a tight cylinder. Anya moved to the far wall, her hands feeling along the bricks until she found the one that was loose. She pulled it out, revealing a narrow, dark hole. He passed her the papers, and she slid them into the hiding place, sealing it back up. The silver lighter went into a different crack, higher up, where a bit of mortar had crumbled away. Their movements were smooth, efficient. They'd done this drill before, but always as a precaution. Tonight, it felt different. It felt necessary. The warmth of the hidden metal lingered on Leo's palm. "They can't unsee what we know," Anya said suddenly, her voice barely a whisper in the restored quiet. The 8 words hung in the damp air, simple and devastating. She wasn't talking about the cleaning crew. She was talking about themselves. The knowledge was already inside them, and there was no way to scrub it clean. Leo nodded, unable to speak. The familiar ventilation hum cycled off with a final, grinding sigh, a timer somewhere marking the top of the hour. Their window was closed. It was time to slip back into their other lives. They left separately, as always. Leo went first, climbing the narrow, creaking staircase that led to a false back panel in the bakery storage room. He paused there, his ear pressed to the wood, listening for any sound in the shop above. All was quiet. He slipped out into the alley, the cool night air a shock after the cellar's damp. The city was a picture of orderly calm. Streetlights glowed with a soft, yellow light. A few citizens walked briskly along the prescribed paths, heads down. Everything looked normal. But as he walked the 12 blocks to his assigned dormitory, Leo couldn't shake the chemical smell from his nose. It clung to his clothes, his hair. He replayed the last hour in his mind. The warmth of the lighter. The fierce look in Anya's eyes as she traced that symbol. The shocking invasion of that sanitizer smell. It had been a normal Wednesday, their secret little island of time, right up until that very last moment. That one hairline crack had appeared, and now he felt like he was looking at the whole world through it. He reached his building, number 77 on Sector G, and swiped his keycard at the door. The light flashed green. As the heavy door swung shut behind him with a solid thud sealing him into the silent, sterile hallway, only one question chased itself around and around in his mind, keeping time with his footsteps. That cleaning squad, with its unnatural smell, had it just been passing by on the street above them? Or had it been down in the tunnels below, coming up? Leo's knees popped, a loud sound in the sudden silence of the dark cellar, as he shot up from the chair. The noise was so ordinary, so human, that it felt completely out of place in that moment of cold fear. Across from him, Anya's chair scraped backward against the rough concrete floor. In the absolute quiet after the lighter went out, the sound was like a scream. It echoed off the low ceiling and the jar-filled shelves, seeming to hang in the air long after it should have faded. His heart wasn't just beating fast, it was hammering against his ribs, a frantic drum trying to escape his chest. A cold sweat, sharp and sudden, prickled across his back under his standard-issue grey work coveralls. He could feel it tracing a path down his spine. He couldn't see Anya, but he could hear her breathing, short, controlled puffs of air in the darkness. Their hands moved in the pitch black, a practice dance born from 7 weeks of secrecy. His fingers found the crinkling stack of pamphlets on the table. He rolled them tightly, the paper resisting for a second before giving in. He felt, rather than saw, Anya's hand brush his as she took them. He heard the soft, gritty shuffle as she moved to the far wall. Then came the quiet, grinding scrape of the loose brick being pulled out. A pause. The whisper of paper sliding into the hole. The solid thunk of the brick being reseated. It was perfect, silent teamwork. But this time, the routine felt fragile, like a thin sheet of glass over a deep hole. The plan, their unspoken rule, was simple. Hide the evidence, wait 5 minutes in the dark, then leave separately and return to their assigned living sectors. Leo's feet were supposed to turn toward the staircase, to climb up into the bakery and vanish into the evening crowd. But his feet didn't move. A new thought, sharp and terrifying, cut through the panic. What if they're already upstairs? What if the chemical smell was a trap, and the exit was covered? In the dense blackness, he sensed more than saw Anya moving, not toward the exit stairs, but toward the room's other shadowy corner. There was a faint metallic rattle, the sound of a chain being carefully lifted. Then a soft squeak of long-unused hinges. He knew what it was. In the corner, nearly hidden behind shelves, was an old, rusty service ladder leading up to a narrow maintenance hatch. It didn't go to the street. It went into the crawl space between the cellar ceiling and the bakery floor, with a small peek hole that looked out into the delivery alley. Anya was going up. This was the moment. The irreversible choice. He could follow the original plan, the safe plan. He could walk up the normal stairs, hope for the best, and be back in his dormitory bed in 20 minutes, pretending this never happened. Or he could follow Anya into the unknown. His body decided for him. His legs, tense and shaky, carried him across the invisible room. His hands found the cold, flaking iron of the ladder rungs. He started to climb, each step feeling louder than the last. The air in the crawlspace was thick with the smell of ancient timber and warm dust. It was even darker up here, if that was possible. He could just make out Anya's silhouette, crouched low, her face pressed to a small, circular grill in the wall. Slowly, carefully, he crouched beside her. His own eye found an adjacent crack in the wood. The peek hole gave them a slice of the world outside, a sliver of the damp cobblestone alley, the rusted metal side of a dumpster, and a view of the street-level ventilation grate from above. Two men stood there. They weren't in the white coveralls of the sanitation workers. They wore the crisp, iron-grey uniforms of public harmony inspectors. Their postures were relaxed, but their eyes were busy, scanning the alley, the walls, the windows. Leo's blood went from cold to icy. Inspectors never did routine sanitation checks. One of them, a man with a neatly trimmed beard, crouched down by the heavy ventilation grate. He ran a gloved finger along its edge. And there it was. A smudge. A bright, rusty red mark on the dull grey metal. The inspector examined his glove, then rubbed his finger and thumb together. He said something to his partner, too muffled to hear through the grate and the wood. It wasn't dirt. It wasn't rust. It was paint. Fresh paint. Leo's mind flashed back. 7 days ago. Last Wednesday. Anya had arrived at the cellar with a faint, dusty smear on the cuff of her trousers. When he'd pointed to it, she just brushed at it and said, "Red clay from the loading bay. They're repaving the south yard." He'd believed her. He'd nodded and opened the pamphlet. But that wasn't red clay on the inspector's glove. That was paint. The color was unmistakable. And last Wednesday, after their meeting, Anya had left 15 minutes before him. "I have a longer walk," she'd said. Next to him in the dusty darkness, Anya was perfectly still. But he could feel the fierce, focused energy coming from her, like heat from a wire. The inspector with the beard stood up, pulling a small device from his belt. He pointed it at the grate, then at the walls. A scanner. He was looking for something specific. Anya's voice was the quietest breath in his ear, barely shaping the words. "My brother marks the drains." The sentence made no sense. My brother marks the drains. Leo knew Anya's file, as much as anyone could know another's. She was a solo assignee. No family listed. No brother. The words hung in the dusty air between them, a cryptic, dangerous clue. Down in the alley, the inspector's wrist unit emitted a soft, electronic chirp. A green light flashed, illuminating his face for a second. He looked at the display and nodded to his partner. It was 1903. Leo's own internal clock screamed. They were supposed to be gone by 1850. They were 13 minutes past their safe window, and the inspectors had been here for who knows how long before that. The two grey uniforms exchanged a last look around the alley. Then, they turned and walked away, their polished boots making crisp, fading clicks on the cobblestones. The alley was empty again. For a long time, neither Leo nor Anya moved. The dust in the crawlspace tickled Leo's nose. Threatening a sneeze, he clenched his whole face to suppress. The relief that the inspectors were gone was immediately washed away by a tsunami of new, worse questions. The red paint. The scanner. The cryptic line about a brother. Finally, Anya shifted, beginning a slow, silent climb back down the ladder. Leo followed, his muscles stiff from crouching. When their feet touched the solid cellar floor again, they didn't relight the ladder. They stood in the dark, two shadows surrounded by the ghosts of empty jars. "We can't meet here next week," Leo whispered. His voice sounded strange to him, rough with dust and fear. "No," Anya agreed, her tone practical, but with a tremor underneath. "I will find a new place." "The pamphlets," he began. "Leave them. They're safe. Safer than we are." She moved toward the main staircase, then paused. "Next Wednesday. The usual time. I'll find you at the factory. By the third parts bin." Then she was gone, her footsteps fading up the stairs. Leo waited, counting to 300, his mind replaying everything. The scrape of the chair. The red paint. The scanner's green light. *19:03*. Her brother marks the drains. He took the other route out, a longer, more twisting path through two connecting basements that came up 3 blocks over. The night air felt different now. Every passing citizen seemed to be looking at him. Every streetlight felt like a spotlight. The city's orderly calm now looked like a held breath, a mask waiting to slip. He made it to his dormitory, swiped his card, and walked the silent hall to his small, single room. He closed the door and leaned against it. The sterile white walls, the single cot, the bare desk, it all felt like a set from a play. A performance of a normal life he was no longer sure how to act in. He replayed the alley scene again. The inspector hadn't looked angry or excited. He'd looked curious, like a man who'd found an interesting puzzle piece. That was more frightening than outright anger. It meant the search was just beginning. And that's when the real weight of his choice settled on him. He had climbed the ladder. He had chosen to see. And what he had seen had recontextualized everything. Last Wednesday wasn't about sharing ideas anymore. It had been a prelude. Anya wasn't just a reader. She was a painter. And he was no longer just a curious bystander. By following her up that ladder, he had stepped into the frame of the picture. The safe, predictable world of his life before 7:14 p.m. had shattered. The pieces were at his feet, and among them, glinting in the memory of the streetlight, was one burning question. If Anya had no brother, who, or what, was marking the drains? The first empty Wednesday was the worst. Leo sat on the edge of his narrow bed in his dormitory room, listening to the city's evening sounds through his single, high window. The distant hum of the monorail. The muffled announcements from the public address speakers on the corner. At exactly 7 p.m., his whole body tensed, waiting for the moment he would normally be slipping into the bakery cellar, the cool air and the smell of old yeast greeting him like an old friend. But the room remained still. The only smell was the bland, clean scent of the antiseptic they used to wash the floors. The silence in the room felt heavy and loud at the same time. He just sat there, his hands resting on his knees, until 8 p.m. passed. The hour came and went, leaving a hollow space inside his chest where excitement used to be. Work at the factory was a strange kind of torture. The parts inspection line on floor 3 was a symphony of normal sounds. The clatter of metal components on the conveyor, the steady asterisk hiss were asterisk of the scanning arms, the low murmur of other workers. Leo's job was to watch a monitor for red error flags. His eyes followed the screen, but his mind was a million miles away. It was replaying the alley, the grey uniforms, the red paint. Every time a real red flag flashed on his screen, his heart would give a painful jolt. He'd stamp the part for rejection, his hand trembling just slightly. He watched for Anya. The textile floor was 2 levels up, and their paths never officially crossed. But sometimes, during the mid-shift nutrition break in the large, echoing canteen, he would see her. She always sat at the same table near the west wall, with 3 other women from her section. On the first break after the cellar, their eyes met from across the room. She gave no nod, no smile. Just a slow, almost invisible blink. A signal. Asterisk, I see you. We are still here. Asterisk, it was a tiny lifeline, but it felt as thin as a thread. The second Wednesday felt a little more normal, which was somehow worse. His body didn't tense up as much at 7 p.m. He managed to read a few pages of an approved technical manual. He told himself this was smarter. This was safer. This was what survival looked like. He took a long shower in the communal bathroom, the hot water beating down on his neck. He stood there longer than his allotted 3 minutes, letting the steam fill his lungs. When he finally turned the water off, the silence was broken by the sound of the other men in the shower room, the quick, efficient slaps of soap, the coughs, the low, tired conversations about shift rotations and the bland canteen food. He watched them through the foggy air. He saw the habitual slouch of their shoulders, the way their eyes stayed down, fixed on the drain or their own feet. He saw the careful, practiced neutrality on every face. No joy, no anger, just a deep, enduring acceptance. A resignation. He looked at his own reflection in the misted mirror. His hair was plastered to his forehead. His eyes looked back at him, tired and empty. In that moment, he didn't see a brave rebel or a keeper of dangerous truths. He saw a reflection of every other man in that room. A man who followed orders. A man who kept his head down. A man whose greatest act of courage was now sitting alone in his room on a Wednesday night. The hope he'd felt in the cellar hadn't been a flame. It had been a ghost, a pale imitation fed entirely by Anya's quiet, ferocious courage. Without her there to spark it, it had simply vanished, leaving behind the cold ash of fear. The third Wednesday, March 26th, was overcast. A dull, grey light filled the city, making everything look flat and washed out. Leo worked his shift, stamped his parts, ate his tasteless nutrient bar at break. He was getting good at being normal. He was perfecting the art of invisibility. That evening, he decided to walk a longer route back to his dormitory, just to feel the air. As he passed a public bulletin board on 5th Corridor, he saw a new notice. It was a public commendation for the public harmony inspectors of Sector G. It cited their diligence in identifying and removing subversive graffiti, promoting visual harmony. A small, grainy photo showed a section of a concrete wall being power washed. The graffiti was a blur, but the color was a familiar, rusty red. Leo's breath caught. He walked faster, his shoes scraping on the pavement. Back in his room, he took off his boots. As he was placing them neatly by the door, a small, folded square of paper, no bigger than a postage stamp, fluttered out from inside the right boot's tongue. It must have been there all day. His fingers turned cold. He unfolded it with clumsy hands. The paper held just 10 words, in tiny, cramped handwriting he knew instantly. * Old Clock Tower. West Sector. Tonight. 11:07. Come alone. * No signature. Just a time that wasn't their time, and a place that was famously derelict and off-limits. The impossible choice landed on his shoulders, heavy as stone. To go was to pull a trigger. It was to step out of the safe, grey stream of his life and into a current that could sweep him away forever. It was to make real the fear that had been chasing him for 3 weeks. But to stay was to bury that flicker of hope for good. It was to sit in this quiet room and know that Anya was out there, facing whatever this was, completely alone. He would be choosing the mirror man from the showers. The man who looked at the drain. He held the tiny paper over the small sink in his room. 1 drop of water, and the ink would blur into nothing. 1 trip to the communal incinerator chute, and the evidence would vanish. He could go to bed. He could show up for work tomorrow. He could continue. His hand didn't move toward the faucet. The dormitory's public address system chimed softly, marking the hour. It was 9 p.m. 11:07 in the West Sector was a long walk, or a risky monorail ride. He had to decide now. He thought about the cellar. He thought about the warmth of the lighter in his palm. He thought about Anya's voice, so full of conviction, saying, * they can't unsee what we know. * he had seen. He knew. And the knowing was a weight he could no longer carry alone in this small, white room. He put his boots back on. He tucked the paper into the most hidden pocket of his coveralls. He opened his door and stepped into the hallway. He didn't walk with purpose. He walked like a man in a dream, each step feeling both terrifying and inevitable. He took the back stairwell, avoiding the main lobby. He emerged into the cool, grey evening. As he walked, he turned her words over in his mind. * My brother marks the drains. He had turned that puzzle around for 3 weeks. He'd looked at every male worker in the factory, wondering. He'd even, in his most paranoid moments, considered if it was a code for the inspectors themselves. But now, walking toward the dangerous, unknown clock tower, a new understanding began to dawn. It wasn't about a literal brother. It was about connection. It was about a network. A brother could be anyone. An ally. A fellow believer. Marking the drains wasn't vandalism. It was a signpost. A way to guide people. To signal safe paths, or meeting places, or warnings. The red paint wasn't a reckless act. It was a message. And Anya hadn't been just painting. She had been writing a letter to anyone who knew how to read it. The realization hit him like a physical wave, stopping him in the middle of the empty sidewalk. The cool night air rushed into his lungs. The pieces tumbled and locked together. Her confidence. Her urgency. The way she knew to find the ladder, the peak hole. She wasn't a lone dreamer with a pamphlet. She was part of something. A silent, invisible something that moved through the city like a whisper. And then Leo realized the truth he'd been clinging to was a lie. The biggest lie of all. He had believed, deep down, that this was just about 2 people sharing a secret. That their little cellar was an island. But it was never an island. It was a single, small boat on a much wider, darker sea. And Anya hadn't just been a passenger with him. She had been reading the stars, charting a course he couldn't even see. She has no brother. She had many. And she was asking him, now, in the darkest point of the night, if he wanted to meet the family. Leo's greatest skill was also his quietest. He had a mind that remembered maps. Not on purpose, not like a spy in a story, but simply because he was an observer. For 12 years, he had walked the same sectors, ridden the same monorail lines, worked in the same factory. His brain, without him even asking, had filed away the patterns. The way the public harmony inspectors moved in their slow, predictable loops. The time the night shift sanitation vehicle turned onto 12th corridor, always 10:20 p.m. The 3-minute gap in camera coverage behind the main recycling depot when the security light flickered. These weren't secrets, they were just the unnoticed rhythms of the city, the ticking of a giant clock most people had stopped hearing. Tonight, he used that clock as a weapon. He didn't run. He didn't hide in shadows. He moved with a deliberate, steady pace, becoming just another worker on a late errand. But every turn he took, every corridor he chose, was a precise calculation. He avoided the well-lit Prosperity Boulevard and cut through the old commercial district, where the streetlights were fewer and the buildings cast long, deep pools of darkness. He timed his crossing of the wide Central Avenue to coincide with the passing of a slow-moving cargo transport, its bulk shielding him from the camera on the opposite corner. He wasn't breaking the rules. He was dancing in the spaces between them. His meticulous, map-keeping mind, which had always just helped him get to work on time, was now navigating a forbidden path. It felt like using a screwdriver to pick a lock, a simple tool turned to a new, powerful purpose. The West sector was different. It was older, a part of the city that had been mostly replaced by newer, cleaner developments. The buildings here were made of rough-cut stone, not smooth polymer. The air smelled less of ozone and more of damp earth and forgotten things. The old clock tower stood in a small, overgrown square, a skeletal finger of black iron and broken glass pointing at the cloudy sky. Its huge, circular face was frozen, the hands forever stuck at 11:07. Everyone knew that time. It was in the history books, the moment the last accord was signed, the moment the old world officially ended and the unified society began. Seeing it frozen there, on this tower in this abandoned place, sent a chill over Leo's skin that had nothing to do with the night air. The main doors were boarded shut with thick, grey planks stamped with official seal. But around the side, half hidden by a thorny bush, a smaller service door hung slightly ajar, a dark crack just wide enough for a person to slip through. Leo paused, listening. The only sound was the rustle of dry leaves in the square. He took a deep breath, the taste of old metal and rain on his tongue, and stepped inside. The darkness inside was absolute. Then, a small light flickered, A single candle, its flame protected by a tin cup. And then another. And another. His eyes adjusted slowly. He wasn't in a grand hall, but in a cramped, circular base of the tower, filled with the ghosts of old machinery. And he wasn't alone. Anya stood near the center, next to the candle. But she wasn't the only familiar face. He saw Marta, the woman who operated the fabric press on the second shift. He saw Ben, the quiet man who drove the parts cart between factory floors. He saw two others he recognized only by sight, a cafeteria worker and a younger man from the water reclamation plant. 5 faces, illuminated in the shaky candlelight, all looking at him. They were just ordinary people. People he passed every day. They were the grey mass, the crowd. And yet, here they were, their ordinary faces now holding expressions of fierce, shared focus. Anya didn't smile. Her eyes were serious, but there was a warmth in them he hadn't seen in the cellar. It was the warmth of recognition. "You came," she said, not as a question, but as a simple fact. Leo could only nod, his throat tight. He looked around at the small group. His transformation in that moment wasn't dramatic. He didn't give a speech. He simply understood. He was not a guest. He was a piece of a puzzle, and he had finally found where he fit. The loneliness of the past 3 weeks evaporated, replaced by a solid, terrifying sense of belonging. "We have a problem," Ben said, his voice low and gravelly. He pointed to a rough chalk diagram on the dusty floor. It showed a map of the Western Sector Logistics Depot. "They've moved the schedule. The weekly supply convoy is leaving a day early, tomorrow night. It carries the paper ration for the next month. All of it." Paper was tightly controlled, a cornerstone of the Society's information lockdown. "If it leaves, the whisper chain stops for weeks," Marta said, her hands twisting a piece of fabric nervously. "We can't let that happen." A plan began to form in the hushed conversation. It wasn't about grand explosions or dramatic thefts. It was about a delay. A simple, mechanical failure. A distributor cap removed from the lead transport vehicle. A small act that would cause a big, time-consuming headache. The depot had cameras, patrols. The risk was immense. Then, everyone looked at Leo. Not with pressure, but with a kind of open curiosity. He realized they knew about his skill. Anya had told them. The man who knows the patterns. His map-keeping mind woke up. He crouched by the chalk diagram. "The patrol," he began, his voice stronger than he expected. "They do a full circuit of the outer fence. But here," his finger traced a line on the dusty floor, "between the generator shed and the main warehouse, there's a blind spot. It lasts 4 minutes. The camera on the south corner pans away at 10:42 exactly, and the foot patrol passes the north gate at 10:45. That gives a 3-minute window. But you have to enter from the east drainage culvert, not the west." He spoke with an authority that surprised him. He listed times, camera cycles, guard shift changes. The others listened, their faces intent. He was no longer just Leo the parts inspector. He was the one who saw the clockwork. He was giving them the key to wind it back. Anya placed a hand on his shoulder, a brief, solid touch. "So," she said, her voice barely a whisper that carried around the circle. "You brought the spark." It wasn't the flame. It wasn't the courage to paint or to organize. It was the precise, necessary knowledge to make action possible. He had brought the spark that would light the fuse. A decision was made. Ben and the younger man from the water plant would go to the depot. They had the skills for the simple sabotage. Leo's job, and Anya's, was to be the lookouts, positioned at 2 different points to watch for any unexpected patrol changes, to signal with a shielded flashlight if the plan went wrong. They moved to leave, extinguishing the candles one by one until only the last one remained, held by Anya. They filed out the narrow door, back into the cool night. The group separated with silent nods, melting away into the darkness of the west sector. Leo and Anya walked together for a short distance, their shoulders almost touching. For a moment, it felt like old times, but richer, deeper. "The red paint," Leo whispered as they walked. It was a signal for a safe meeting place near the drain pipes. Anya glanced at him, a hint of a smile touching her lips. You understand. They reached their split point, an intersection where she would go north to her lookout post, and he would go south to his. They paused. The city was quiet. Then, from the direction of the Western Sector depot, miles away but carrying perfectly on the still air, came a sound. It was the high, rising wail of a perimeter breach alarm. It wasn't the common curfew siren. This was sharper, more urgent. It sliced through the night, a sound of violation. Their plan had been for silence, for a small, unnoticed act. This was not that sound. They froze, looking at each other. Had Ben been seen? Had something gone wrong? The alarm screamed, painting the night with panic. At that moment, from the direction of the old clock tower square behind them, they heard a different sound. The groan of heavy, rusted metal. The squeal of the tower service door being forced violently open against its will. Leo's head whipped around. Anya's hand found his arm, her grip tight. The door they had just slipped out of was now being forced from the inside by someone who hadn't been with them. Someone who had been waiting. The sound from the depot wasn't for their small sabotage. It was a distraction. The tower door burst open with a final, grinding shriek. A year later, on a cool evening in early April, Leo walked down 17th Corridor. The bakery was still there, its windows still displaying the same, perfectly identical golden brown loaves. The smell of baking bread still warmed the air. But as he passed the alley beside it, he didn't even slow his pace. He just glanced down it. The chipped blue door that had once hidden the cellar entrance was gone. In its place was a smooth, welded steel plate, sealed shut with heavy rivets that gleamed dully in the afternoon light. It looked like a scar, a healed-over wound on the face of the building. He felt nothing looking at it. No fear, no nostalgia. It was just a landmark. A place where something had once ended, and something else had begun. He walked past it, his footsteps steady on the pavement. His knees still gave a soft pop when he climbed stairs, a familiar sound that reminded him of that night in the cellar, the night everything shattered. But now, the pop came from climbing different stairs, the exposed metal fire escapes on the older buildings in the Riverside district, where he helped string communication lines between rooftops. It was a sound of work, not panic. 2 doors down from the old bakery, where a state-run shoe repair shop had once been, was a different kind of business. The window was painted over from the inside with a soft, white wash, so you couldn't see in. A small sign, hand-painted in neat lettering, read, Riverside Bindery and Fine Paper. It was a black market print shop, and it was the worst-kept secret in the sector. Everyone knew what it really was. That was the point. It operated in plain sight, a quiet act of defiance dressed up as commerce. Leo pushed the door open. A little bell jingled overhead, a cheerful, normal sound. Inside, the air was warm and carried the rich, inky smell of printing press oil and fresh paper. The walls were lined with shelves holding what looked like legitimate ledgers, custom stationery, and beautiful hand-bound notebooks. The low hum of machinery came from a back room. The woman behind the counter looked up. It was Marta, from the textile floor. Her hair was cut shorter now, and she wore simple, sturdy clothes smudged with ink. A burned scar, shiny and smooth, curled from her right wrist up to her knuckles. It wasn't an ugly mark. It looked almost like a vine, or a twisting flame. She had gotten it the night of the depot alarm, when a can of solvent had tipped over near a candle in the rush to hide the real printing plates. She never talked about the pain, only about saving the plates. "Afternoon, Leo," she said, her voice friendly. No codes, no whispers. Just a greeting between friends. "Marta," he nodded, sliding his satchel off his shoulder. It was a simple, grey bag, worn at the corners. But inside, it held the distribution list for the week, names, sectors, and drop points for the new newsletters. They didn't call them pamphlets anymore. The newsletters carried stories. Small things. A report on a hidden community garden that had sprung up in a vacant lot. A poem written by a factory worker. A drawing of a bird someone had seen, a species not listed in the approved wildlife registry. They were whispers, yes, but louder now. More connected. Marta took the satchel and placed it below the counter. She didn't open it. She trusted him. In return, she lifted a heavy, wrapped bundle from under the counter and placed it before him. New material. Fresh from the press in the back. The edges of the paper were clean and sharp, not crinkled and fragile like the old cellar pamphlets. The words inside were stronger, too. Tell Anya the new illustrations are in this batch, Marta said. She'll want to see them. I will, Leo said. Anya was across the city today, in the north sector, teaching a small group how to read the old architectural diagrams, the ones that showed the original, now forgotten waterlines and access tunnels of the city. Her red paint was now used for subtle, beautiful murals in out-of-the-way places, murals that contained hidden maps for those who knew how to look. As he turned to leave, his eye caught something on a high shelf behind Marta. Sitting between two thick ledgers was a simple object. A silver lighter. It wasn't the same one, of course. That one was lost, probably buried under rubble in the old clock tower square after the inspectors had raided it. This was another, found in a different forgotten place. But it served the same purpose. It was a symbol, passed to whoever was working the night shift, to bring a little flame into the dark back room. It was a small, solid piece of history, warming another hand. He stepped back out onto the street, the bundle of newsletters snug in his own bag. The weight was familiar, a comfortable pressure against his side. He walked toward the monorail station, blending in with the other citizens heading home. He was just a man with a bag, after all. No one looked twice. At the corner, he passed the public bulletin board. The old commendation notice for the inspectors was long gone. In its place was a new, brightly colored poster from the Public Harmony office, promoting the upcoming season of Unified Reflection. It showed smiling people in a pristine park. Leo looked at it, then looked at the people actually walking past him. He saw a woman subtly adjust her scarf, a scarf with a delicate, embroidered pattern that matched one of Anya's first public murals. He saw a man pause to tie his shoe near a drainpipe, his hand brushing a tiny, almost invisible chip of red paint on the curb. The society feared the spark most of all. They feared a single, fiery explosion that would light up the sky. But a spark isn't just for a bomb. A spark is for a lantern. A spark can light a candle in a print shop. It can light a torch to see a map. It can be passed from one hand to another, again and again, until the dark is filled not with one blinding flash, but with 100, 1,000, steady points of light. Leo reached the station, swiped his transit pass, and stepped onto the waiting train. He found a seat by the window. As the train began to move, gliding smoothly out of the station and into the gathering twilight, he looked at the city passing by. It looked the same as it always had, orderly, grey, calm. But he saw it differently now. He saw the cracks where the light was getting in. He saw the silent, steady work of ordinary people, choosing to create, to connect, to remember. The weight he carried wasn't fear anymore. It was purpose. It was the quiet, uplifting warmth of knowing that no one is ever truly alone, and that even the smallest, most careful hands can help build a new world, one whispered truth, one piece of paper, one spark of connection at a time.